Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this session, this Eurovis session on interaction and storytelling. We have 3 papers in this session, so there will be plenty of time for discussion. So if you have a question, you can ask already during the presentation or afterwards in the Discord channel or in the YouTube chat. The first presentation is a paper which is called Short Contact Touch Manipulation of Scatterplot Matrices on Wall Displays by Patrick Riemann, Gabriele Molina-Leon, Joshua Reibert, Florian Echtler, and Bernd Fröhlich. And the presentation will be given by Patrick Riemann from Bauhaus Universität Weimar in Germany.
Welcome to my talk. My name is Patrick Riemann. I'm with the Virtual Reality and Visualization Research Group at Bauhaus Universität Weimar, and I'm going to talk our paper, Short Contact Touch Manipulation of Scatterplot Matrices on Wall Displays. Isenberg argued 2013 that the screen real estate of a large display is an advantage to be exploited for better performance and user experience in visualization tasks. Large vertical displays are well suited for presenting large overviews and exploring details by showing larger individual items. This is particularly true for scatterplot matrices when presenting a large number of attribute combinations at once, as shown in this image. Multitouch appears to be the natural choice for performing interactions from up close, but presents a number of challenges, including the uncomfortable or even impossible access to plots beyond arm's reach, or that longer touch interactions on blunt surfaces can be truly unpleasant. To overcome these challenges, we wanted to design a set of multitouch gestures that are short contact, robust, and locally applicable. In particular, all long-range movements, swipes or drags on the display that would extend beyond arm reach should be replaced by short contact fling or flicks to deal with the reachability, unpleasantness, and even to mitigate fatigue issues. Simple local interactions should rely on one finger and should be somewhat familiar to the user. Range specifications, such as defining a focus region, should be performed by 2 fingers to avoid sweeping one finger across the range. Our efforts resulted in this vocabulary of short contact, multitouch gestures for versatile plot and screen management, navigation, and select and filter operations. The gestures for plot and screen management are crucial for providing an individual and proper working space for the user. With direct plot resizing, a user can resize a plot by dragging any corner of this plot towards the intended size. Grabbing a border instead increases only one dimension. Enlarging a plot even more is also simple. Just performing a fling outwards at the corner of the plot triggers a continuous increase at a constant speed until the user taps on the screen again to stop. In contrast to the matrix level, focus on context inside a scatterplot is activated by a pinch gesture. 2 fingers define and enlarge a particular range to a focus area. Those ranges are then also propagated within their respective rows and columns. You may have noticed in the previous video snippet, creating local and global focus areas results in a 2-tiered focus and context, as you can see here on the picture. You can see that the important plots 1 and 2 are enlarged. We also wanted to emphasize a certain range in plot 1, resulting in the focus area 3. All focus regions are consistently propagated along the row and the column, which results in a kind of cross-haired focus with the initially changed plot at its center. In order to provide an overall and consistent layout, additional focus regions as 4 and 5 appear where the propagated and enlarged attribute axes meet again. Given the dimensions of a wall display, it is physically challenging to reach every area. To overcome that, we propose a navigation technique we call Paternoster. A two-finger fling triggers the cyclic movement of the entire matrix. The fling's speed maps the length that should be moved. The display is designed as self-repeating or cyclic matrix metaphor. Rows or columns that are pushed out on one side reappear seamless on the other side. The second variant of the Paternoster, the continuous Paternoster, is triggered by a three-finger fling. Then the matrix is moving at a constant speed until being stopped by a tap in the desired location. For local interactions with the data points, we employ familiar metaphors. Axis-based selection selects an entire range of an attribute. A long tap then keeps only the selected data points, and a lasso allows more complex selections. Excluding data points is also easy with a throwaway gesture. Additionally, labels can be revealed by simply tapping on the elements. The smooth integration of all these gestures builds our vocabulary and enables the user to perform analytical tasks on the wall. For example, searching for typical movies, maybe with a revenue between $800 million and $1 billion, rating above 70%, and we were interested in pairs of movies that differ 1 minute in runtime. So we are navigating to the right plot to start with. Then fling increasing the plot for having a nicer workspace with better recognizable data points. Select the ratings on its axis and keep this set. Then we are opening a focus on a given revenue range, doing the selection and filtering immediately afterwards, decreasing our current plot and increasing the runtime plot, both fling-based, and then a vertical focus helps us separating data points that partially overlap in order to find the two couples of movies that match our requirements. Based on such tasks, we conducted a pilot study in order to see whether the users are able to solve complex tasks typical for analytics scenarios. Meaning, are the users able to perform and to learn the touch gestures? Are the two-tiered focus and context areas in the selection mechanisms used and understood by the users? Prior to the user study, we tested our setup with an expert in multi-touch interactions to identify remaining usability problems. Fortunately, our expert didn't find any bigger flaws. He suggested only slight improvement, such a reset gesture, which we then included into the following user study. The actual study was performed with 11 participants and followed typical protocol. First a tutorial, followed by a free exploration phase, and observation of the participants solving a set from 3 defined tasks. Then an SOS questionnaire and interviews about the user experience. All users were able to solve the tasks with the expected outcomes. The usage of alternatives or variations of gestures, like the stepwise versus the continued Paternoster and the direct versus the fling-based plot resize, was balanced in our observations, and the appropriate gestures mostly were applied in the appropriate situations, as we had hoped for. Further, almost all users used both focus and context levels on the matrix level and inside the plots. None of the participants reported arm fatigue during the study, with what might indicate that our short contact gestures mitigate this effect. This is important in general for the usability during extended analytics sessions on those large displays. Given the inherent hardware limitations of our infrared touch setup, which unfortunately reports finger touches already slightly above the surface and sometimes loses touch points during prolonged touch interactions, the achieved SOS score is promising. A closer look at the individual SOS answers reveals that the most of them are in the best range between 3 and 4. The Paternoster concept complements physical navigation. It is not a replacement. It is used, of course, in vertical direction, but for the horizontal direction, our general impression was that the user walked short and middle distances, but walking the entire 4 meters of the display, or just flinging it, was an easy choice for the most of them. Even though we have focused on single-user interaction, we observed casual collaboration of the users, who took turns interacting on the screen and showing each other different aspects of the data. This seemed to happen naturally, as if one took turns in speaking. To take this further, interaction through complementary tools should enable users to help each other instead of competing. The concept of territoriality could be supported by using separate areas on the large screen. However, user identification might be necessary in this case. Our wall-based ploms motivated us to think about how other standard visualizations could be adapted following our short contact multi-touch approach. For a coordinated multi-view framework that allows users to select and to combine the best tools for the job, the main challenge is to find a common subset of multi-touch gestures that works well across all visualizations, but also provide gestures for visualization-specific interactions. In order to provide a better support for the analytical tasks, we need to extend the interaction repertoire for the wall. Such as for reordering columns or rows, we need a proper undo-redo mechanism and some other convenient data management operations. Our multi-touch approach could be very well combined with remote interaction techniques. But we think for close-up interaction, multi-touch is the natural choice, if the implementation is slick, as it was confirmed by our reviewers.
Okay, thank you, Patrick, for this presentation. We have a couple of questions in the YouTube channel. So the first was a comment by Wolfgang Eigener who said, Paternoster, what a nice metaphor. And the first question is by Kevin Elaine. Maybe I missed this information, but how long were the sessions?
So we had slots with the participants of half an hour, so including explaining the system, after that performing the assignments, and then also answering the questionnaire and also giving some additional feedback. So overall, I would say the answering or forming the assignments itself is about 15 minutes roundabout.
Okay, then we have a comment by Jason Dykes who says, yes, we could show posters like this, a Paternoster poster. And of course, they would have to be scheduled on the roster. Thank you, Jason. Pedro Vasquez is asking, I was unable to see how the user was able to find the proper chart in the demo. Are they labeled? I have not seen the names of the charts.
Yeah, there are labels in the charts, but because in reality, so the wall is 5 meters by 2 meters and something, so they are sufficient enough in reality, but it's harder to see in the video. That's right.
Okay. But you only labeled the diagonals, right?
Yeah. We had this discussion that maybe can improve that and adding labels to each of the plots, but so far it worked. So, but I guess in the future revision of the system we are going to add more labels to it.
And Peter Power has another question, which is, and I also missed whether there was visual cue that communicates the use of the gesture that is going to be interpreted by the flick moves?
No. There are no visual cues that say what are you performing right now. So that's right. So you had to learn some metaphors or some gestures and then performing them. So there was no additional visual cue except that you see maybe for the Paternoster that you see whether it's ongoing and you have to stop it, or if it stops by itself. So this could be a visual cue, but any additional visual cues we haven't implemented.
Are you planning, or have you any ideas about how?
So, we really haven't thought about that. I have to admit.
So it was Christian Tominski is suggesting what octopuses for gesture guidance, okay? And Perko concludes this question by great presentation. A lot of nice ideas. Okay, is there another question? There was another comment from Marc Jean Boudot. Always great interaction techniques from Weimar. Already touched.
Yeah, so okay. Maybe I could add something for the first comment about the Paternoster. So it really immediately came to mind. So it was just there. So the name. We haven't searched actively for a name.
Okay, but it's a nice name. Okay, any more questions? If there are no more questions, then thank you, Patrick.
Thank you.
The next paper is Structure and Empathy in Visual Data Storytelling, Evaluating the Influence on Attitude by Johannes Liam, Charles Perrin, and Joe Wood. And the presentation is given by Johannes Liam from City University of London.
Welcome everyone, I'm Johannes, and today I'm going to present our study on evaluating the influence of visual narrative techniques on people's attitudes. Broadly speaking, visual narrative techniques are the tools used in visual data storytelling to create narratives, including techniques to introduce structure or elicit empathy. So let's start and see what we've done in our study. We, as a visualization community, have many assumptions about the benefits of storytelling in visualization. For example, that storytelling increases memorability or engagement. However, such expectations often lack empirical evaluation describing the audience perspective. The aim of our study was to investigate to what extent visual data storytelling can influence people's attitudes. To address this research question, we conducted 2 online studies with the goal of measuring the effect of using visual narrative techniques on people's attitudes towards a strongly polarizing topic. For that, we needed to select a topic and design experimental conditions. With UK immigration, we chose a topic that is close to life and for which people tend to have strongly held attitudes. To measure attitudes towards immigration, we adopted well-established scales from social sciences used by the European Social Survey. Attitudes are mutable opinions about stimulus objects, which can be anything that is liked or disliked, including individuals, groups, or abstract concepts. They can be influenced in various contexts and situations, which makes attitudes a good measure to study. Our work is based on the assumption that visualization, especially the ability visual narratives have to engage with the topic, can play a role in shaping attitudes. For our survey, we created 3 different designs, 2 visual narrative designs and 1 baseline design. The baseline design is an interactive flow map, showing the in- and outflows of migration to and from the UK. No visual narrative techniques are used. The chart in the top right corner shows the major reasons of migration, like work or studying. The empathy design consists of 6 personal visual narratives presented in a first-person perspective. It uses the concept of showing the humans behind the dots, with the aim to elicit empathy. The structure design is a visual narrative showing aggregated migration data. It uses a third-person narration style. With a stepper layout, 6 thematically ordered stages are revealed gradually, making it easier to process the information. In our survey, we used these 3 designs as 3 between-subject conditions. Let's have a closer look at the details. We conducted 2 experiments that differ in only one major aspect. While in experiment 1, immigration attitudes were assessed before and after the stimulus exposure, in experiment 2 they were assessed only once, after stimulus exposure. For each experiment, we pre-screened and recruited around 300 participants using Prolific. The survey started with a demographics questionnaire. Then, only participants of experiment 1 did the immigration attitudes pre-test. In the empathy and the structure condition, participants had 5 minutes to interact with the stimulus. In the baseline condition, they had 8 minutes to freely explore the flow map. To ensure all participants were exposed to the same information, the narrative conditions had additional 3 minutes to freely explore the data. In the last part, 3 filter questions were used to test task attention. Then we used the human values scale, also from the European Social Survey, to assess the participants' basic beliefs. In 21 items, participants had to judge how much or not much alike they are to a described persona. Human values capture how conservative or open a person is to change, and how self-transcendent or self-enhancing someone is. Compared to attitudes, human values are more stable over time. Finally, we measured immigration attitudes, in experiment 1 the second time, in experiment 2 for the first time. The European Social Survey contains 7 questions that assess the opposition to different groups of immigrants, as well as the perceived threat of immigration, for example, economical or cultural threats. We expected that participants of the empathy condition will be less opposed and perceive immigration less as a threat than participants of the other 2 conditions. The rationale here was that participants can easily relate to the fates of the individuals of the personal narratives. Additionally, we expected that participants in the structure condition will be less opposed and perceive immigration less as a threat than participants of the exploratory baseline condition. Our rationale here was that a few depended on evidence rather than potentially prejudiced assumptions about immigration might lead to more positive attitudes, and that a structured navigation through the data might lead one to understand that data evidence more clearly, which would by transitivity result in the structure condition leading to more positive attitudes towards immigration. Here you can see the results of our confirmatory analysis. The figure shows the normalized sample means for the opposition and the perceived threat variables, together with 95% confidence intervals. For experiment 1, we also calculated the pairwise average difference between the pre-stimulus and the post-stimulus attitudes. Looking at the overlaps of the confidence intervals, we can see that for both experiments there are no significant differences between conditions for the opposition variable. This is different for the perceived threat variable. In experiment 1, both narrative conditions had a small but significant effect on participants' attitude change. Participants in these 2 conditions perceived immigration less a threat after seeing the stimulus. This result meets our expectations. The reasons for these small effects could be that participants were not influenced much by the stimuli, or that they were subject to conservatism bias when responding to the questions a second time. Assuming uniformity of population between the different conditions, it appears that the structure condition had a large effect in experiment 2 for the perceived threat variable. The reasons for this unexpected result could be the absence of the pretest not priming participants, as well as prior beliefs, and less the stimulus, which however experiment 1 indicates. It is possible that the author-driven approach in the structure condition, a narrative style that might be perceived as patronizing, played a role in the responses. In an exploratory analysis, we investigated these two results regarding demographics and human values, which showed that the results do differ between different groups. Here we can see the two human values dimensions and the demographic variables and their values. So what kind of participants showed meaningful attitude change as found in result 1? For the empathy design, open and conservative people alike contributed to the effect, but only the most self-transcendent ones showed meaningful change. In the structure condition, only conservative participants showed more meaningful attitude change following our expectations. All demographic variables played a role in the empathy condition. Mainly participants that are female, from the middle-aged cohort, have a higher education, have enough income, are more religious, or have a centre-left political orientation, perceived immigration less a threat after watching the stimuli. In the structure condition, only gender, education, religion, and the political orientation played a role. Let's see now what types of participants contributed to the unexpected effect of the structure condition found in result 2. The effect is visible regardless the human values dimension, openness to change and conservation. Again, only the most self-transcendent people contributed to the effect. Participants that are male, are coping on their income, or are more religious do also contribute to the effect. The effect can be observed regardless the level of education. The other variables do not show this effect. Differences between group values of the conditions are not significant. The contradictions between the experiments, together with small effects observed, do not allow us to clearly verify our hypothesis. Visual anthropomorphization appears not to elicit empathy effectively, at least in the context of immigration attitudes. Strong narrative structure can act against evidence-based understanding and can influence the line of thought. Our study joins the growing set of studies investigating the role of visual data storytelling that tend to find small or unexpected effects when testing different visual narrative techniques or visual communication modes. So, why is measuring the effect of storytelling challenging? Long, complex, and realistic enough stimuli are important, which makes it more difficult to isolate the impact of visual narratives from the context around them. In the context of strongly held immigration attitudes, small but notable effects might be more important than they look. In a wider context, the authoring and the perception of visual narratives are very subjective, making it difficult to quantify effects in experimental setups and even more to generalize results. Although the benefits of storytelling in visualization seem often obvious to us, we still don't know what the effect really is. One possible way forward is to develop alternative approaches for evaluating visual data storytelling that are able to capture the subject's complexity. This includes interdisciplinary approaches, deepening collaborations with psychology or narrative theory. So if you want to discuss the future of evaluation in visual data storytelling, feel free to contact us. You can find all the stimuli, questionnaires, and additional materials online. For now, thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Johannes, for this nice presentation. So we have plenty of time for questions, so you please use the YouTube channel or Discord for questions. I already have a question here by Peter Isenberg, and that is, might your color choice have influenced people's opinions? It was quick, but I saw some bright red arrows on the map, and red could mean danger.
So I couldn't hear you all the way, but I see the question on Facebook, on YouTube. So the thing is, it might be the case that the color choice influenced decisions. However, the colors were across for the baseline conditions and the structure condition were the same, the red and blue ones. And as well, so also in the narrative conditions, the 3 minutes where participants interacted with the baseline condition, they had the same colors. So it might be the case that color influences people for sure, but I'm not sure how strongly it influenced the results.
Okay. You mentioned in the discussion that that one speculation is that people might have felt patronized by the empathy design. Do you have any ideas?
By the structure design.
By the structure design. Sorry. How do you have any ideas how to alleviate this feeling? Any hints how this could be improved? Maybe?
Can you repeat the question? It was like.
Yeah, you have a bad internet connection, right?
It was
so
pretty.
How do you have any ideas how the feeling of patronization could be overcome?
That's a good question. Yeah. So I think one way would be to be really transparent about everything that you present in some way, whatever way this will be, but that you allow people to investigate the data freely in addition to telling a story, basically. But it depends on your aim as well. So if you want to convince someone or not, for example. But I think being transparent about where's the data, what is the data about, where's the data from, allowing people to investigate would help.
Okay, we have 2 more questions on the YouTube channel, so maybe you can also read them there, in case your internet is unstable.
Yeah. So,
questions. With Peter Isenberg, who's asking, what kind of threats did you ask people about? Threat to oneself or to society? And does it make a difference if people answered about one kind of threat or the other?
So the threats. So we adopted from the survey from the European Social Survey, and it's the following. You can see that on our web page, you can see that the questionnaire, but the threats are including economical threats. So do you perceive that immigration, people coming to the UK, poses economical threats or cultural threats, or the threat of like your state of the art in your country in general? And we didn't look at the items too closely, saying if there's a difference between cultural or economical threat. But we have the analysis in the additional material, so we could take a look there, and I can elaborate later in the Discord channel as well.
Okay. Then we have a question by Kevin Hahn. There's a pre-test questionnaire on the immigration attitude. Will this prime participants in some way, and have you considered other options like implicit tests?
Yes, so that's the big difference between these 2 experiments we had. So one experiment had this pre-test, and one experiment was lacking the pre-test, basically. So, and it looks like experiment 2 was the one without the pre-test. So the experiment 1 with the pre-test, the strength of experiment 1 in this case is that statistically it's stronger, basically. The downside of having the pre-test, as Kevin says, is that you prime participants, and so that's the reason why we had the second experiment, and it looks like that it's possible that the pre-testing primes participants. So yeah.
Okay, and a last question by Peter Isenberg again. Did people actually have enough data to judge effects of immigration on the future, like the influence on unemployment, expected changes in crime taxes, or whatever they might be concerned about?
That's a good question. Just so it's always complicated when you evaluate like storytelling systems, basically, because finding like a degree between very complex and rich information versus I can still test for evaluation if you can still test something. And So we focused on the reasons why people are coming. So there are many more would be many more information out there to add, basically. So we didn't provide an interpretation of the data to allow make judgment about future about immigration on the future. But yeah.
Okay.
I have to think about a little bit more about this question, and will respond on Discord as well.
Yeah, you can use the Discord channel anytime. It will also be.
Yeah.
Okay. If there are no more questions, thank you again, Johannes. Thank you also for the discussion. And we come to our final presentation in this session, which is the paper Co-Creating Visualizations, a first evaluation with social science researchers by Gabriela Molina Leon and Andreas Breiter. And the presentation will be given by Gabriela from the University of Bremen in Germany.
Welcome everyone to my talk on co-creating visualizations, a first evaluation with social science researchers. I will present to you today the results of a project that I'm working on together with my co-author Andreas Breiter at the University of Bremen. First of all, let me start by explaining what do we mean by co-creation. Co-creation is a design methodology that has its origins in the participatory design movement in the 70s and is defined by Sanders and Stapers as a methodology to design not only for the users but also with them. This means that the users, the potential users of the design product, are not only involved for listing requirements at the beginning and at the end to test the product, but they're actually involved throughout the whole process. They come with their ideas and they help to take decisions. This means, of course, that they share responsibility and accountability for the product that is designed. And the goal of applying such a participatory method is to increase satisfaction and long-term adoption because the feedback of the users is included early on. Furthermore, this methodology follows a set of principles. The first one is mutual learning. This means that the designers learn from the users and vice versa. Empowerment gives giving voice to everyone involved, to everyone affected by the design. Openness and diversity means inviting everyone to participate, and hopefully then the group of co-creators is a representative sample of all the stakeholders. Then there's involvement and ownership. This means everyone participating, getting involved, and then hopefully feeling that they're owning the end product. Transparency refers to the goals of the project and the decision-making process being clear to everyone. And effectiveness refers to the design product then being effective at tackling or solving the problem at hand. In a particular case, we decided to apply co-creation to a design process in our project. So we work in a project called Global Dynamics of Social Policy that is a collaborative research center at the University of Bremen, where an interdisciplinary team of political scientists, sociologists, geographers, and computer scientists work together to conduct research on social policy. One of the goals of the project is to design an information system where we collect all the data of all the countries in the world for the last 140 years to then explore and analyze it, and this is, of course, where visualizations could help. In particular, we had two research questions that we wanted to answer. The first was whether apply co-creation to our case would lead us to achieve the 6 principles. We decided to apply co-creation because we had people coming from different disciplines that had one goal in common, so we thought it would suit to learn from each other and so on. And the other question we had is what were the benefits and limitations of co-creation, and to find out this through our case study. We have 2 main contributions. The first one is that we evaluate co-creation as a design methodology, in particular in the field of visualization design. There have been other case studies before, but let's say we focus on evaluating through qualitative methods such as interviews and user studies and so on. And the second contribution we have is the lessons we learned, so that researchers and practitioners who consider using co-creation can learn from our experience. So here I give you an overview of the co-creation process. This process took over a year. Last year in 2019, it had 7 steps. And co-creation is usually run through workshops. And in each workshop, which are here shown in blue, we had 3 workshop facilitators. And then we had in total 14 researchers or 14 participants from 5 different research groups. And each research group had a topic of interest, all related to social policy, but let's say with a focus on social security or healthcare, education, and so on. Here, I just give you an overview, and I will explain shortly some of the steps, but you can find more details on the paper, in the paper. So in the beginning, we had some preliminary meetings with the researchers, and we conducted a survey asking them what are their goals, how do they think that visualization could help them, what is their previous experience in visualization. And let's say once we knew a bit about their background and the data they use, we organized the first workshop. This workshop was called the ideation workshop because it was a workshop about first collecting the ideas, finding out what were the goals of each participant, and then brainstorming about what could be done. We used multiple methods, such as visual thinking, paper prototyping, and rapid software prototyping that had been used in the related literature. And we documented and observed the participants in every step. We also filled the reflection form before and after each workshop to first document our goals, our plan, and then document what happened in the workshop, and let's say reflect whether we are following our plan and what exactly happened. After conducting 2 workshops, we decided to conduct another survey. This was the first element of our formative evaluation, so that it was a focus on evaluating the process already. And the main outcome of this was that participants felt listened to through co-creation, so they felt that their ideas were being taken into account. However, by then, the participants were not yet convinced that co-creation was really going to help them create visualizations that would support their research. We, of course, use the data we got from this, reflected on it, and tried to improve the process further. And afterwards, we conducted interviews to find out what is the details about the workflow of the researchers. We also conducted another workshop, and in the end, we conducted a user study where we presented for the first time the system to the participants. So through the process, it was, we had multiple iterations of designing. So we started designing on paper, then we created some software prototypes, we iterated on them based on their feedback. But in the user study, we presented for the first time everything integrated in one system. So it was their first opportunity to interact. And there, one of the findings was that they definitely could recognize the influence they had on the system. So as I mentioned before, one of our main contributions is the lessons we learned. In the paper, we reported 7 lessons. For time reasons, I will focus now here on 3. And let's start by lesson 3. This was actually that we need to balance openness and commitment. As I said in the beginning, one of the principles of co-creation is about openness and diversity. And trying to follow that, we invited everyone in our project to take part in the co-creation process. And we also always allowed new participants to join the workshops or other events. However, in the end, this led to some people only participating once or twice. And in the end, only 3 out of 14 researchers really participated in every step. This, of course, led to often need to repeat, and let's say some people had less clarity on what exactly was going on or what had happened so far. And inter-day interviews, we also discussed it, and it was pointed out, and as in the code you see here, that it's just hard to commit to such a broad process because, as I said, it took over a year, and then, of course, it's hard to see already whether it's worth the effort to join every time, depending on, without knowing exactly what really comes out in the end. So this is one lesson. Another one was that we shouldn't forget that co-creating is agreeing on the diversity of ideas. So this refers to 2 things. On the one hand, co-creation is about taking everyone's ideas into account. For visualization designers, it can be tempting to, let's say, just follow our instinct of saying, okay, I think this certain visualization will help to solve the problem at hand. However, we should not discard the ideas of anyone, because the idea is that through the iterative process to test everyone's ideas, to find out what could be improved. So this is always something to keep in mind. And on the other hand, the ideas can be very diverse. We try to agree on what was important for everyone, and then we tackle that. But then we also notice that if we only tackle the things that are important for everyone, then we somehow lose what was important for only certain groups. So it's important to always keep in mind that keeping the diversity of the ideas is also relevant. Another lesson we learned is that participation is not always perceived as an advantage. So usually participatory methods, let's say, have one of their main principles is that it's positive to always give the opportunity to everyone to participate, and that the participants are happy about it. Let's say that this is something that they definitely want. And this is actually something that we did not consider to be true for our particular case. Although many people were happy with the end product and they considered that it was worth the effort to participate in the co-creation process because they saw their influence in the end, this was not everyone's opinions. Because, for some participants, it would have been better to rather come and already have finished options. So they rather expected us to come already with multiple finished products that they could choose from. So let's say this is something, that shows that not everyone considers participating to be an advantage. So what I can say about the conclusions of our paper is that regarding the principles, whether we reached them, we definitely noticed that participants felt empowered and listened to, and that co-creation indeed led us to a well-received product. We had positive feedback in the end about the process, and participants really did notice their effort. They noticed their ideas being involved. Regarding the benefits and limitations, according to the participants, the main benefits were actually working together with their peers. Since we work in a large project, the workshops actually were one of the best opportunities to meet everyone, and the co-creation process actually helped the researchers to not only work together in the workshops, but also outside of them. And the other main benefit that they pointed out is that, they designed a system really tailored to their research goals. Furthermore, the main limitations were that, as I mentioned earlier, participating in such a process requires a high level of commitment, which for some people was something that they struggle with. And in particular, early career researchers struggle with connecting their participation in the co-creation process to the publication goals, because they somehow would have liked to see how a specific outcome of the process was going to help them in their in the PhD goals. This is all from my side. Thank you very much for watching, and now it's time for questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Gabriela, for this nice presentation. So we have the discussion started already in the YouTube channel. So we'll first read out the comments by Jason Dykes, who says, "Nice focus on lesson learned. Thank you for explaining these great focus. And it's really important that we value participants' time and use it efficiently with respect and in ways that are beneficial to all." And Peter Isenberg says, "That's a great point. I wonder to what extent co-creation allows bringing drafts and prototypes and then co-creating the next extensions, maybe less perceived effort." Okay, can you comment on this?
Sure, thank you for the comments. Actually, this is one of the main results or the main conclusions we reach, that we really need to reflect whether co-creation is the correct methodology for the particular case. I think the participants really felt appreciated by being so involved, but this is not something that everyone would like to do or have the time to. I mean, we did bring the prototypes and iterations, but the idea was also that they would be taking part figuring out the details. And this is what each person needs to decide, whether the method fits with their audience or their domain experts.
For you, the visualization designer, were you surprised by the outcome, or did it fit your expectations? Would you have done it differently without this process?
Well, to be honest, I think we were not fully surprised. It also depends how the project was. So in our particular case, it was already decided that we wanted to apply this method, and the decision had already been made. And by the time the decision was made of the method, not everyone that was actually going to participate in the project was there. So actually, for some people that were new and actually hadn't really agreed before, they were like, oh wow, I have to participate in all the sessions. Is this really going to benefit me? So in particular, those kind of experts that were somehow taken to the process without being asked first if they really wanted to, they were not so convinced. However, the people that were closer to our project and that were more involved into the big picture of the project, they were more motivated. So in that sense, I think that fits it. But I think it really depends on how many details you want to figure out with your co-creation partners.
Jason Dyke's comments: good design in exploratory, data-driven context never really ends. And the balance between design and user-driven design is really interesting, tough to navigate, and has all sorts of unexpected effects on the process and the people. There's a question from Marc-Jean Bourdon, maybe a bit off topic, but now that in-person workshops are not possible, do we already have experience in doing them virtual, or ideas how to engage people?
We haven't tried to conduct any workshops, but indeed we have conducted some user studies. Now we have to get creative with the tools that there are. We use, for example, a tool to record with somehow like a Zoom session. We are both there, and then we record what the person does on the screen. And I would say it works for one-on-one sessions, but doing in groups, we haven't done it yet, and I can imagine it has more challenges.
Bianchi Dai is asking the difference in expectations about what the participatory process involves is interesting. Do you think that there's more leaning towards co-creation rather than picking from finished products, or the opposite?
I would say it really depends on the interest of the person in visualization. The main positive thing that our partners pointed out was that they were curious about visualization, and then they had the chance to learn so much through this close collaboration. So I think in that sense, for those people who already had this curiosity, they were definitely more into co-creation. They were happy that they learned from us and we learned from them. But for those who were rather like, okay, I have this particular problem and I want like the solution for that, they were more like, okay, I just want a finished product and then I give you some feedback. So I think it depends on their interest in co-creation.
Any ideas how to increase the commitment also for these kinds of people?
It's tricky. I would say what we learned is that it's better to focus on specific problems. We have a large project where many people had different interests, different research groups. This was very hard to handle because sometimes it's just not in the interest of the particular problem that the person brought to the session. But if you focus on rather smaller groups that have more specific problems, I would say be much more productive because they can really see that you're tackling what they're really interested in.
Okay, I don't see any more questions. I think the question on Discord concerns the previous paper. So that would conclude this question. I'm very happy that a lot of discussion was going on. So thank you again to all the speakers of this session and the audience who was very engaged in the discussions. Please keep it on. The Discord channel is open and you can still get in contact with the authors and discuss your questions there. Thank you very much.